Welcome to Don't Lock Off Like a Meathead. Today, we're going to talk about the most important beginner tips for improving your lock off, especially if you're new to climbing. It's pretty common for climbing tips to poo-poo the lock off as an inefficient technique compared to the dead point. Totally guilty of this myself. But in my opinion, it's really only a meathead technique if you don't take the time to explore some of the nuances in the movement. In this mini-series, we'll go over how to improve the lock off in 3 different videos for beginner, intermediate, and advanced climbers. So that way you can learn how to maximize this technique. And today we'll be going over the beginner tips. So let's jump right in. In my first year of climbing, I was a lock off fiend, but I also used to play tennis, which is another sport known for causing elbow pain. And the way I climbed back then led to many periods of intense elbow pain. I'd leave the gym with my elbows so inflamed that it was uncomfortable to even drive home. This caused me to completely change my climbing style to a dynamic style, but at some point I realized I needed to reincorporate the static movement in order to break through a plateau. I was hesitant to do it at first out of fear that the elbow pain would come back, but luckily I was able to take all the things I learned about movement in the time since I renounced static climbing to make my return to it sustainable. Now, everyone's situation is different of course, but this did lead me to realize that most people probably suffer from elbow pain because their movement is not optimized. Because there are so many skills you can develop in climbing, it's common for intermediate or advanced climbers to overcompensate with other skills. That is why even though the tips that I'll share in this video are aimed at beginners, there are certainly things that I think climbers of all levels could take away to improve. So, what is a lock off? For those who don't already know, a lock off is a technique in climbing generally composed of 2 steps. 1. You grab a hold and pull downwards on it in order to bring your body close to reach for the next hold. 2. You'll hold your body in place as you reach for this hold. This is generally done in a 90-degree angle, and holding this 90-degree angle is the lock off portion. Now, let's analyze the trade-offs of using the lock off. The pros. Risk. A lock-off will allow you to climb statically, so it'll have reduced risk of falling if you have enough strength to execute it, that is. And this is good for outdoor climbing when safety is an issue, or on-site or flash attempts where you don't want to risk blowing your first attempt. Close to the wall. It'll keep your body close to the wall, so it is great for climbs where the crux is body tension oriented. Beta. It is very intuitive to pull with our arms, so the beta has low mental load. This is also great for on-sighting or flashing since you don't need to think much. Bad holds. The lock-off is great when you need to hit bad holds, like small crimps, low-friction slopers, or pockets, and this is because the dynamic alternative could lead to injury or have high coordination requirements, whereas a lock-off will let you hit the hold perfectly in a position of tension. Lock-offs generally require more strength since it revolves around pulling, i.e. it's muscle-centric, not mechanics-centric. In this case, you'll need strength in the fingers and upper body muscles. And this will be a requirement regardless of what optimizations we add. Upper body muscles are generally weaker relative to your body weight than lower body muscles. Low movement learning. As we mentioned, the beta is simple and intuitive. It's common for climbers to over-rely on lock-offs and pulling in general. This can lead to stagnation in technical learning, and it can be a major reason for plateaus, especially in a sport like climbing, which has so much options for movement. So, based on this, lock-offs are great for when you need a stable body position and can manage the movement without taking any major strength deficits from executing it. While it's easy to over-rely on them due to how intuitive they are, we won't be going over that in this video, since I plan to show how to make the movement more efficient for when you do need it. If you're interested in how to learn more movement, check out this video on beginner drills. The last 2 are great for teaching beginners 2 practical ways to start improving their movement vocabulary. The first tip is about addressing that second issue. It's very common for beginner climbers to default to just pulling with their arms since it's intuitive to climb that way. But learning to leverage your lower body is a fundamental part of learning efficient climbing movement. Most of climbing can be thought of as being a combination of push and pull motions. It just depends on how many body parts you can learn to do those 2 things with, especially how many you can do at once. Let's examine some examples of how both can be used in the legs to help with common lock-off scenarios. Push. You can push with the legs to reduce the amount you pull with arms in scenarios where your toe points into the wall. The mental cue I liked when I first started practicing this was to imagine I was extending my leg. Doing so will move your hips higher. Practice this on different angles to get an idea on when this is helpful or not. pull. You can pull with the legs to reduce the amount you pull with the arms in scenarios where your toe claws around a foothold, like say if it's around a corner or pointed parallel to the wall. The mental cue I use here is opposite of the pushing example. Rather than extending the leg, imagine that the leg is trying to curl up. Doing this will allow you to move your hips closer to your feet, and this is super helpful for movements where you need to move laterally. Beginner tip 2, lats. The next tip to understand with locking off is that the majority of people will approach it as though it's a movement initiated with your biceps. This is a common misconception, but the biceps are such small muscles compared to some of the other muscles in your body. A truly effective lock off will make use of as many upper body muscles as it can, including the shoulder and lats. The lats are back muscles that can be trained by pull-ups, but it is also incredibly common for people to do them incorrectly by using the biceps rather than the lats. This video provides a great explanation on how to use a lat pull-down machine to start learning how to use your lats in an isolated manner. And remember, I'm advocating this video not because I want you to get stronger, but because I want you to learn to isolate the muscle. It's all about learning the neural recruitment so that way you can harness that muscle, not just make it stronger. On the wall, my main tip is to imagine you're pulling your shoulder blades down and back, rather than just pulling down with your arms. Doing so will help to leverage those lats so that way your upper body muscular chain will also be maximized. Learning to use your lats will not only improve the upper body portion of the lock off, but it will also create great habits for how you can start to learn to isolate specific muscles when climbing. And trust me, that has been one of the greatest skills that I have developed as I have improved my own climbing, so I cannot understate the value of that. Learn to use your lats to improve your lock-offs in the now so that you can learn to isolate your muscles for the projects of the future. That's it for this one. Hopefully this video has provided a concise and practical way for beginners to level up their lock-offs. There's definitely way more to locking off than just pulling, so I hope you'll join me for the next 2 installments of this series. You can check out this video on toe smears if you want some more ways to improve your static climbing, and the intermediate Don't Lock Off Like a Meathead will also be coming out soon, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe for more climbing tips and progression content, and I'll see you in the next one.